see you all here tonight. And Stuart Diamond, just
Thank
a
you.
very warm welcome to the Helge Center at Valparaiso University, and thank you.
Well, thank you.
For
Pleasure to be here.
us this week. Your biography is really quite extraordinary. You all can see it on the sheet there, but if you go onto your website, which I would highly recommend, and you click on biography, I expected one paragraph of text.
Mm-hmm.
But instead there's like one box that is about music. And then you go down and there's another whole story about your work in film, and another whole story about your work in music video, and another whole story about your work in education. And your work in education branches off in many directions. You've worked with liberal arts colleges, you've also worked with the financial system.
That's
and
right.
Educated people in finance about the nature of trust.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the biography itself is a pathway of purpose. And I think I would like to start by asking, what's the connective tissue among all those boxes, among all those moments in your extraordinary career? What connects them?
I think it's an excellent question because it's something I've been pondering my whole life, of looking for the connective tissue or the principles that are generating this, or the similar creativity that is obvious must be within all of it. I mean, I've been having a great time here speaking to such a diverse conversations I've had with almost everybody, from spiritual to religious, and I haven't even gotten to the music and art department yet. And we're touching the business, and it was the business department that invited me. And arguably, you know, the bio that was put out, I did purposely for the Woodrow Wilson program so I get hired a lot. Normally I would put the music at the top, but I knew if I was going to get hired by a college, I had to put my business credentials at the top, and they would hire me, and it works. Because I did music, because frankly the music department doesn't have the leverage in the school to command the money to hire somebody for such things. So I know enough about academia to know how some of it works when I'm on the board of a college. So it is a question, and I like to emphasize over the years, when you look at this diverse biography, you know, when I come to a place, when I go home, I always tell the story when I'm at these colleges, what a great experience it is, and I'm a luminary for a week, and I'm famous, and they take me around, and they introduce me typically as a Renaissance man. But secretly in my heart I'm saying, you know, it's also a story of failure, of failing at so many, I want to say failure, of coming to blocks in a career path time and time again, and finding your dreams not happening. Okay, dreams as a musician, I've had extraordinary experiences. And I think one of the agendas of this whole program is to demonstrate the value of liberal arts versus just a purely technical program. And that's why I'm hired to come on these, you know, that's the agenda of the Woodrow Wilson program, is to emphasize the value of liberal arts. And what I've come from going to schools is this story to tell of how much the liberal arts have salvaged me, and the strength throughout my career of not of my skill as a composer or a business person, but really my background is in philosophy and thinking and thought, and a strong liberal arts background that became the key to the creativity, the originality that I've clearly demonstrated, and now in retrospect at this point in life I can see that I was a pioneer in many fields. I didn't know it at the time, but now historically I can authentically say that. Just by default, and to go through the actual stories, and I look back, and would be, I think, a classic through leading all of this is, as a performer, I never planned on being a performing musician. I wanted to be a composer, and I didn't go to any music school. I just went to some good liberal arts schools, and at one point I was a bassoonist originally. I played bassoon, and but I was always interested in electronic music, and that I was doing in the composing. Those were the days we had the original machines with the analog boucles and Moogs with all the wires, which were much more fun to play than the iPad where you're just pushing a few buttons and everything's preset. And in some ways, again, because I was original, thinking differently, I was at a right place moment historically to be one of the pioneers in that field. And myself and others created sort of the aesthetic you still hear in electronic music. The culture, the sound, and what's produced hasn't changed all that much over the last 50 years. And we were pioneers just because of an accident historically that we were there at the right place. Right after the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Club Band, there was a moment of history, and we weren't there. And it's not saying I'm the greater genius, it just happened to be this moment in music history. Then in the 70s, I'm playing bassoon. Didn't go to conservatory, so I'm a good bassoonist, but I'm not going to get into any good orchestras. I mean, I can play. I'm playing with some friends. And then one day, and now there's a reason to this story, I see in a magazine of a new instrument that's just been developed called a lyricon, which is a wind controller. It lets you play it like it looks like a clarinet. If you go online, you can see it. It's all electric, but it transforms your breath and embouchure into electricity and lets you control a monophonic synthesizer, and it's incredibly subtle when you do it. I couldn't wait to get my hands on it. And I form a little band, and we're going to start performing. And what happens instantly overnight, as I now tell the story, I went from becoming a rather mediocre bassoonist to the world's greatest classical lyricon player, by dint of being the world's only classical lyricon player. And yet, immediately, I have gigs all over the place. And we put together a group, a bunch of keyboards, and we're loud as a rock band. And we're doing, performing around New York. And then you did get media coverage, and I'm being declared everything from the future of classical music, innovative and breakthrough, to the beginning of fascist classical music, according to the Village Voice. So, and the New York Times writing huge articles, and the Christian Science Monitor, and suddenly I'm getting all this coverage.
Yeah.
And now I look back, and and then it's just, you're a roadie, you're lugging all this equipment up, you're going, after paying off the union people to get into these gigs, and you can't enjoy the concert afterwards because there's no reception, you just got to break down like a rock band. But I'm playing sort of this, I'm writing out this sort of classically oriented electronic music. And now I look back and I realize, yeah, I was one of the first groups, and arguably I still say we're still performing, so I'm one of the oldest lived groups that still do this stuff. And so I can make some claim, and I'm hoping some PhD student will do some obscure thesis off us on the future. But now I look back and I go, and let me give one more caveat. Over the years, and we were a combination eventually of playing our original music and improvisations and playing the classical literature as written on electronic instruments. So I'm playing my old bassoon sonatas, literally, that I learned in high school. We do pictures at an exhibition live, and it's as loud as an orchestra. It's great fun to do, really exciting. And I have done scores and scores of solo recitals as a classical wind player. And the reality, that's more than probably 95% of any kid who went to Indiana or Juilliard as a wind player has ever done in their life. You'd have to be Ron Powell before you've done more solo recitals than I have. So at this point, and I'm getting to a point here, what was it that made me pick up that instrument versus all the great players that eclipse me as a musician I don't come close to? But there was something else that got me to see the opportunity to pick it up and develop that instrument. And that's the principle I'm getting at. There was something different that came not from a conservatory, but came from somebody who was studying Plato and Socrates, I think, and dealing with the great philosophy departments that I was